Racist cop brings the wrong black woman to court, then learns she's a federal prosecutor. They say justice wears a blindfold, but in a world riddled with prejudice, some choose to ignore the balance of the scales. In this eye-opening tale, a power-hungry cop with racist motives crosses paths with the wrong black woman, only to discover she holds more authority than he could ever imagine. It all starts with a simple traffic stop that spirals into a nightmarish sequence of abuse, defiance, and shocking revelations. By the time they reach the courthouse, the tables turn in a spectacular fashion. Stay tuned for a drama filled with dark secrets, legal fireworks, and a reckoning that no one saw coming. Officer Richard Bowman had always prided himself on keeping order in the city of Chicago. Stationed in a neighborhood that saw its fair share of tension, he believed himself to be the final line of defense against chaos. Yet there was a darkness coiled within him, a latent, insidious prejudice. His fellow officers sometimes laughed off his remarks, chalking them up to old-fashioned thinking. But for Richard, these beliefs were not relics of the past. They were part of his daily operating procedure. He would say things like, "I've got a gut feeling about certain people," and none of his colleagues dared challenge him out loud. It was a muggy Saturday afternoon when his path crossed with Catherine "Cat" Robinson. Cat was a 32-year-old black woman who had grown up on the South Side and graduated from Howard University School of Law with honors. She had fought her way through every possible barrier to become a respected federal prosecutor, working out of the U.S. Attorney's office near the Everett M. Dirksen, United States Courthouse. On that particular day, however, she was dressed casually. Jeans, a comfortable t-shirt, and sneakers, like any other Chicagoan running errands. Little did she know, her attire and her skin color were about to make her a target. Kat had been hurrying to meet her friend for a late lunch. Traffic was thick, and the midday sun made the asphalt shimmer as if the city streets were on fire. Despite the oppressive heat, she kept her windows rolled down for a breeze and blasted her favorite podcast on criminal justice reform. She sang along, half distracted by the conversation in her earbuds and the honking of nearby cars. Richard Bowman had been lurking on a side street, waiting for an excuse to pull someone over. In his mind, there was a certain profile that spelled trouble. It was never something he said outright, but he made it obvious in the statistics of who he stopped, searched, or arrested. He saw Kat's car pass by, an older model sedan with tinted windows, and immediately felt that spidey sense of his. He pulled out behind her, tailing her vehicle for a few blocks. Kat noticed the police cruiser in her rearview mirror but thought nothing of it. She was a law-abiding citizen with valid registration and insurance. But when the lights flashed and the siren gave a sharp wail, her stomach did a small flip. She quickly pulled over, mentally preparing to speak calmly and politely, just like she advised witnesses and defendants in her federal cases. Bowman approached Kat's car, one hand hovering near his holster. "License and registration," he barked. The hostility in his voice was immediate, like he was almost disappointed she hadn't made a run for it. Kat calmly reached into her glove compartment, retrieving the necessary documents. She gave them to him along with a polite smile. "May I ask why I'm being pulled over, officer?" she asked, trying to keep her tone neutral but respectful. Bowman's lip curled. "Do I need a reason?" he shot back, ignoring the question. He walked back to his cruiser with her paperwork, leaving Kat's heart pounding. It wasn't her first unpleasant interaction with an officer, but every such moment was a reminder that no matter her status or accomplishments, she could still be vulnerable. After a few tense minutes, he returned, tossing her license and registration through the open window onto the passenger seat. "Your taillight is broken," he lied, even though it wasn't. Kat knew enough about the law to guess where this was going. Before she could protest, Bowman ordered her to get out of the car. The situation felt surreal. Her first instinct was to identify herself, but a lifetime of caution stopped her. She simply complied, heart racing. Bowman demanded she step around to the back of her car. His gaze was cold, disinterested in anything she had to say. He tested the lights himself. They worked perfectly, but he glared at her as if to imply she was somehow tampering with them. "I want to search your car," he said. He gave no explanation beyond the false claim of a faulty taillight. Kat was torn. She knew her rights. As a federal prosecutor, she understood the Fourth Amendment and the rules that govern traffic stops and searches. But she also knew how quickly a situation could escalate if she protested. She might say, "I do not consent to any searches." But that phrase, correct as it may be, could set him off. She steadied herself. "Officer, respectfully, there's no probable cause. My taillight isn't broken." She responded as calmly as possible. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying her nervousness. Bowman's cheeks flushed a deep red. "I can take you in for resisting a lawful search," he snarled. His hand drifted toward his cuffs, itching to slap them around her wrists. It was a power play, and Kat recognized it from a mile away. Sighing inwardly, she decided not to escalate it on the curb. "Fine," she said. "Search the car." The search was humiliating. Bowman rifled through Kat's belongings, rummaging around her trunk as if he expected to find contraband or stolen goods. Kat stood near the curb, watching him toss aside her neatly folded gym clothes and rummage through the receipts in her glove box. A small group of bystanders gathered at a distance. Some people took out their phones to record, but nobody dared intervene. Kat's mind raced. I should show him my ID from the U.S. Attorney's office. That would stop this right away. But a little voice in her head asked, or would it? Could it make things worse? She had worked on multiple police misconduct cases, and the stories she'd heard were horrific. After a solid 10 minutes of fruitless searching, Bowman slammed the trunk shut. "You're coming with me," he declared, as though he had actually found something incriminating. Kat's eyes widened in disbelief. "For what?" she asked. Her voice finally broke from its forced calm. But Bowman didn't answer. He only grabbed her arm and forced her wrists behind her back. The metallic click of the cuffs sent a jolt of panic through her. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, but Bowman ignored them. He shoved Kat into the back of his cruiser, leaving her feeling furious and helpless in equal measure. At the station, Kat found herself processed like any common criminal, fingerprinted, photographed. Her every attempt to state her occupation, to show her credentials, was rebuffed. An officer behind the desk, who seemed disconcerted by Bowman's actions, tried to ask for details, but Bowman brushed him off. "I'll handle the paperwork," he growled, glaring at Kat as though she was some dangerous felon. Placed in a holding cell, Kat wrestled with a swirl of emotions. Anger at Bowman, fear of the unknown, and the acute embarrassment of having her dignity stripped away. She thought about calling her colleagues, but Bowman had confiscated her phone. The clock ticked, and she realized that each passing moment meant more confusion, more potential repercussions. If she didn't surface, her office would wonder where she was. Then again, she reasoned, it might actually help to have them come looking for her. Soon enough, Bowman's voice echoed in the hallway. "We're taking her to the courthouse," he announced loudly. Kat's ears perked up at the mention of a courthouse. Which courthouse? She wondered. Surely they wouldn't take me to the Everett M. Dirksen building. But even if they did, I know half the staff there. She kept quiet, figuring the truth would come out eventually. And it would be glorious. They transported Kat to a small municipal courthouse for an immediate hearing, citing suspicious behavior and resisting a lawful search. The hearing was supposed to be routine, a quick process to decide if there was probable cause to keep her detained. Bowman strutted in like a conquering hero, brandishing a folder of hastily compiled paperwork. Kat was led in wearing handcuffs, a situation that felt painfully surreal. The courthouse waiting area buzzed with the usual chaos: tired public defenders juggling multiple cases, anxious family members biting their nails, and the occasional local reporter hunting for a sensational scoop. Kat felt the sting of humiliation. She was used to entering courthouses as a professional, not as a defendant. If any of her colleagues saw her here, it would be both mortifying and outraging in equal measure. Bowman sidled up to a young prosecutor from the local district attorney's office, a fresh-faced attorney named Margaret Way. Way looked at the charge sheet, her eyebrows shooting up when she saw Catherine Robinson under defendant. She recognized the name but couldn't immediately place it. Bowman, however, looked completely unfazed as he handed over his version of events. With any luck, he thought, the judge would rubber-stamp the charges and move on. He had no idea the storm he was about to unleash. Kat was led into the courtroom flanked by a bailiff. The courtroom was fluorescent lit and cramped, with rows of worn wooden benches and a judge's bench that had seen better days. Judge Yolanda Peters presided, a woman known for her no-nonsense approach. She didn't suffer fools lightly, and her gavel was infamous among local defense attorneys for coming down hard on theatrics. Officer Bowman sat confidently, fully expecting a perfunctory hearing. Meanwhile, Kat stood behind the defendant's table, a public defender she had never met at her side. The PD, Michael Carlson, offered her a reassuring nod. Before the hearing commenced, Carlson whispered, "I can try to get a quick dismissal, but we need evidence. Do you have anything that can help me?" Kat's eyes glinted. "I have more than enough," she whispered back, "but let's hear the charges first." She wanted to see Bowman squirm under scrutiny. She wanted to see the look on everyone's faces when the truth came out, when they discovered who she was. Perhaps it was pride, or perhaps it was the principle of the thing. Either way, she wasn't going to let Bowman off easy. "Call case 31245, People of the State of Illinois versus Catherine Robinson," the court clerk announced. And so the showdown began. Margaret Way rose, reading from her notes. "Your Honor, the defendant was pulled over for a broken taillight. Officer Bowman then had reason to believe—" "Objection," Carlson interjected. "There's no evidence the taillight was broken. Officer Bowman's own report does not confirm a mechanical failure. The only reason listed for the stop is the officer's observation." Judge Peters raised an eyebrow. "Officer Bowman, step forward," she instructed. Bowman did so, posture stiff and defiant. "Explain the nature of the stop," the judge demanded. Bowman cleared his throat. "I observed the vehicle with a non-functioning rear light, Your Honor. Upon inspection, Miss Robinson behaved suspiciously. She resisted a lawful search and became verbally aggressive." He delivered his lines like a well-rehearsed script, confident nobody would question him too harshly. Judge Peters frowned. "Do you have dash-cam footage or body camera footage to support this?" she asked, scanning his paperwork. Bowman hesitated, then mumbled something about a malfunctioning body camera. Kat's stomach clenched. She'd heard this story before. Cameras that conveniently break in the middle of questionable stops. Kat couldn't hold her tongue any longer. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "I can provide an alternative account of this incident. I also have my own dashcam footage, if I'm allowed to present it." A ripple of surprise swept the courtroom. Judge Peters motioned for silence, addressing Kat directly. "You wish to represent yourself, Mrs. Robinson?" she asked, noting that Kat was currently standing beside a public defender. It was an unusual question, but the judge must have sensed Kat's confidence. Kat exchanged a quick glance with the public defender, who shrugged, almost relieved. "Yes, Your Honor," Kat replied. "If it pleases the court, I have some specific expertise relevant to this situation." Bowman bristled, firing a glare in Kat's direction. "This is a simple matter," he interjected. She resisted arrest, period. But Judge Peters was already intrigued. "Ms. Robinson, please step forward." Kat approached the podium. She stood up straight, attempting to project the composure she always summoned in federal court. She looked the judge squarely in the eye. "I'm a federal prosecutor, Your Honor," she stated in a clear voice. The silence in the room was immediate and profound. Margaret Way's jaw dropped slightly. She finally recognized the name. Bowman, on the other hand, looked like someone had just pulled the rug out from under him. He shifted his weight, trying to hide his surprise and failing. Judge Peters folded her hands. "A federal prosecutor?" she repeated. "Go on." That was the moment Kat knew she had the upper hand. The tension in the courtroom reached a fever pitch. Bowman's knuckles went white around the edges of the stand. The gallery, which had been half empty, started filling up with curious attorneys and onlookers who sensed a spectacle brewing. Even the bailiff looked between Kat and Bowman in disbelief. Kat calmly recounted the events. "I was pulled over under false pretenses. Officer Bowman claimed my taillight was broken, which it wasn't. He demanded to search my car without probable cause. When I reminded him of the Fourth Amendment, he threatened to arrest me for resisting. He proceeded with an unjustified search and arrested me anyway." Judge Peters looked at Bowman. "Officer, do you have a response?" He hesitated, stumbling over his words. She didn't cooperate, Your Honor. She was confrontational." Kat lifted her wrist to indicate the red marks from the too tight cuffs. "Confrontational, or simply pointing out her rights?" The judge mused, more to herself than anyone else. "And you had no camera footage, Officer Bowman?" He shook his head. "None that's available." Margaret Way, the prosecutor for the state, stepped in, looking visibly uncomfortable. "Your Honor, in light of this new information, I might need to re-evaluate the charges." Judge Peters nodded. "I think that would be wise." Within minutes, the hearing had shifted dramatically. Bowman, who'd entered the courtroom exuding overconfidence, now looked cornered. Meanwhile, Kat was released on her own recognizance. The judge gave a pointed look at Margaret Way. "I expect you to conduct a thorough review of all evidence," she said, tapping her pen on the bench. Way nodded vigorously, muttering something about verifying the dashcam footage from Kat's car. "We need to request the footage from Ms. A. Robinson," she said, avoiding Bowman's eyes. Outside in the hallway, Kat finally retrieved her phone and personal effects. She took a moment to breathe, feeling the wave of relief and lingering anger crash over her. Just then, Bowman stormed up to her, ignoring the fact that they were still inside a government building. "I don't know who you think you are," he growled in a low voice, his eyes practically spitting venom. "But you won't get away with this." Kat looked at him calmly. "Who I think I am." She paused for effect. "I'm an assistant U.S. attorney, Officer Bowman, and you just made the biggest mistake of your career." Bowman scoffed and hurried off down the hall. Several heads turned to watch him retreat, while Kat stood firm, unshaken, determined to see this through. News traveled fast in the legal community. By the time Kat returned to her office near the Everett M. Dirksen United States Courthouse, whispers were already circulating about the arrested prosecutor. Some of her colleagues ran up to her, eyes wide with concern. One of them was her friend and fellow AUSA, Dana Moss, who'd heard the rumors through the grapevine. "Are you okay?" Dana asked, rushing to give Kat a quick hug. "Is it true some cop falsely arrested you?" Kat sighed and gave a concise version of events. Dana's face darkened with anger. "I can't believe this." "You should press charges or file a civil complaint." "Something," she fumed. Kat nodded slowly, removing a small USB stick from her purse. "I've got dashcam footage that proves everything. I want to do this by the book, though. No shortcuts, no questionable tactics. If Officer Bowman has a history of this kind of behavior, we need it exposed." Dana agreed. "I'll help in any way I can, but are you sure you don't want to keep it quiet? The attention might complicate your ongoing cases." Kat exhaled. "That thought crossed my mind," she admitted, "but this is bigger than me. If I stay silent, I'm enabling him to continue, and who knows who his next victim might be." The following day, Kat presented her dashcam footage and her account of the arrest to her supervisor, Deputy U.S. Attorney Charles Whitman. Whitman was an older gentleman, well respected for his integrity. After reviewing the footage that clearly showed a functioning taillight and Bowman's increasingly hostile demeanor, Whitman leaned back in his chair, templed his fingers and said, "This is undeniable evidence of misconduct." He shook his head grimly. "I've heard rumors about an officer matching Bowman's description in some questionable stops, but nothing this blatant has ever come across my desk." Kat's heart pounded. What are our options? Whitman leaned forward. We have a couple of paths here. The local district attorney's office can prosecute him for false arrest, but that might get messy. Alternatively, given that you're a federal prosecutor and this might involve potential civil rights violations, we can bring in the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. At the very least, I'd suggest involving internal affairs at the Chicago Police Department. Kat thought about the potential backlash. She knew there would be those who accused her of wielding her position for personal vengeance, but that worry couldn't override her conscience. Let's do it, she said, her voice steady. I want to file a formal complaint and let the legal process play out. As the wheels of bureaucracy began to turn, Bowman realized he was in trouble. He received notice that there would be an internal review of the stop and subsequent arrest. Rumors swirled around his precinct, with some colleagues quietly recalling past instances where Bowman's stop seemed questionable. His immediate supervisors tried to maintain neutrality, but the tension in the air was palpable. One evening, as Bowman was leaving the station, he found himself confronted by an internal affairs detective named Jacob Fremont. Fremont was known for his relentless pursuit of truth in misconduct cases. We need to chat, Fremont said, blocking Bowman's path to his car. About what? Bowman snapped, feigning ignorance. Fremont gave him a tight-lipped smile. I think you know. There's a hearing coming up, and a very serious allegation has been made against you. I need your side of the story. Formally. Bowman felt cornered, but managed to maintain a veneer of composure. Get in line, he muttered. Talk to my union rep. He brushed past Fremont, leaving the detective with a raised eyebrow. If Bowman had hoped to intimidate the IA detective into backing off, he had miscalculated. Fremont was just getting started, and Kat's complaint was about to send shockwaves through the department. Meanwhile, the local media caught wind of the story. A small blurb on a local news channel mentioned, "An unnamed Chicago police officer is under investigation for possibly arresting a federal prosecutor under false pretenses." The story lacked details, but was enough to ignite conversations about police overreach, especially among communities already wary of law enforcement. Kat's phone started ringing with calls from journalists, activists, and even old classmates who recognized her name. She forwarded most calls to the press office of the U.S. Attorney's office, determined to keep her statements professional and measured. At the same time, Bowman took to venting on social media, albeit anonymously. Under an alias, he posted rants about cops being hamstrung by bureaucrats and how certain people hide behind their status. Some of his posts garnered sympathetic comments, but others condemned him, especially as rumors about the dashcam footage circulated. Late at night, Kat found herself reading some of those hateful, anonymous messages. They stung, but they also steeled her resolve. "He's just digging his own grave," she muttered, snapping her laptop shut. She had faith in the legal system she served, even if she knew it wasn't perfect. The truth had to come out eventually, and she was prepared to see it through. The day of the formal hearing at the Internal Affairs Division arrived, and Kat entered the building with her attorney, an ACLU-affiliated lawyer named Desiree Parker. While Kat was fully capable of advocating for herself, it was generally advised not to represent yourself in a case involving your own rights. Emotions run too high, and the stakes are too personal. In the stark, fluorescent-lit room, Bowman sat at one end of a conference table, arms folded defiantly. A few IA officers, including Jacob Fremont, sat across from both parties, ready to ask questions and record statements. Kat felt a swirl of emotions, anger, betrayal, and a twinge of anxiety. This was the same system she had worked within for years, now investigating one of its own on her behalf. Fremont began by laying out the facts. He asked Bowman about the alleged broken tail light. Bowman stuck to his story. He claimed he saw it flicker off, insisted it was reason enough to stop Kat's car. Then Fremont played Kat's dash cam footage. The crisp, clear video showed the tail light functioning perfectly from the moment Kat started her car until the moment she pulled over. A beat of silence followed. "Explain that," Fremont said calmly, pausing the video on a frame where the tail light was clearly lit. Bowman sputtered, face reddening. Kat watched him squirm and felt no sympathy. The truth was finally staring him in the face. In a desperate attempt to salvage his credibility, Bowman claimed that maybe Kat had replaced the bulb or manipulated the footage. The accusations only made him sound more unhinged. Desiree Parker wasted no time. "Officer Bowman, do you have any documented evidence of a broken taillight from the scene? Photographs? A written statement from another officer?" Bowman shook his head. "No, but—" Parker leaned forward. "But nothing. You had no probable cause to stop her. You proceeded with an unlawful search, and then made a false arrest." She let the accusation hang in the air. Bowman stiffened, crossing his arms. Internal Affairs took meticulous notes, and Detective Fremont's expression grew graver by the minute. Eventually, he signaled the end of the questioning. "We'll be deliberating on next steps," he said. "But Officer Bowman, you're to remain on desk duty for the duration of this investigation. Any violation of protocol during this period will lead to immediate suspension." Bowman glared at Kat as he rose from his seat. "You're ruining my life," he said under his breath, only loud enough for Kat and Parker to hear. But Kat stood firm, returning his glare with an unwavering gaze. "You did that yourself," she replied. Back at the U.S. Attorney's office, Kat found her workload doubled. Aside from her usual caseload of federal prosecutions, she had to coordinate with internal investigators, compile evidence, and occasionally respond to media inquiries. The saga with Bowman was gaining traction, especially in activist circles. Some hailed Kat as a hero for standing up to police misconduct, while others questioned whether she was using her federal position to strong-arm local law enforcement. Despite the spotlight, Kat pressed forward with her regular duties. She had a major narcotics case to prepare for, and her boss, Deputy U.S. Attorney Whitman, had made it clear. While the department supported her, they also needed her at her best for ongoing prosecutions. "You're good at compartmentalizing," he told her. "Use that skill now." In rare moments of downtime, Kat found herself replaying the arrest in her mind. She recalled the look in Bowman's eyes, a look that plainly said he believed he could do whatever he wanted without facing consequences. It made her blood boil, but she also recognized how fortunate she was compared to others who had suffered similar injustices without the resources or the position she had. It drove her to push harder, not just for herself, but for the principle at stake. Meanwhile, Bowman's life was spiraling. His desk duty assignment felt like a personal insult. Each day, he sat at a cluttered desk, pushing paper and answering phones, while the rest of his unit hit the streets. He overheard hushed conversations. Some officers defended him, others distanced themselves. The tension weighed heavily. After a draining day, Bowman finally checked his mailbox to find a summons. He was being sued in federal court by Kat for violation of her civil rights. Anger flared within him like a raw wound. He felt cornered, betrayed by the system he'd served. In his mind, it was all politically correct nonsense. He had no intention of taking it lying down. Over the next few weeks, Bowman met with a police union lawyer. The lawyer, a gruff man named Gerald Brent, advised him to settle. "This is a losing battle," Brent said, tapping the dashcam footage on his laptop. "You can't refute this. The best we can do is mitigate damages." Bowman refused. "I won't let this woman ruin me," he snarled, slamming his fist on the table. Even as the lawyer warned him he could be facing job termination, or worse, Bowman doubled down. "We'll fight," he insisted, ignoring the sinking feeling in his gut. The civil trial began on a crisp Monday morning at the Everett M. Dirksen United States Courthouse. The case was the talk of the local legal world, a federal prosecutor suing a local police officer for false arrest and civil rights violations. Cameras and reporters crowded the steps outside the courthouse, capturing every attorney's entrance. Though federal courts typically don't allow cameras inside the courtroom, the press presence outside was undeniable. Kat arrived with her attorney, Desiree Parker, feeling a rush of adrenaline mixed with dread. She'd been in federal court countless times before, but never as a plaintiff in a civil rights case. The irony wasn't lost on her. She took a deep breath and focused on the facts: the dashcam footage, the lack of probable cause, Bowman's inconsistent statements. These would be their keys to victory. Bowman entered through a side door, trying to avoid reporters' questions. He wore a dark suit, looking far less confident than on the day he'd arrested Kat. Sitting at the defense table, he avoided eye contact, focusing instead on a stack of papers he kept rifling through. When the judge entered and called the court to order, the hush that fell over the room was thick with anticipation. Each side prepared to argue their version of what had happened on that fateful day. The trial opened with Kat taking the stand. Under Parker's guidance, she recounted every detail of the traffic stop, from the moment Bowman's siren first blared to her humiliating experience in the holding cell. She spoke calmly and methodically, explaining her background and her knowledge of legal procedures. The jury listened intently, some nodding sympathetically when Kat described how powerless she felt, despite being part of the justice system herself. When it was Bowman's lawyer's turn to cross-examine, Gerald Brent tried to poke holes in her story. "Could you have been mistaken about your tail light? Maybe it was flickering at the time, even if the footage doesn't show it?" Kat responded with unruffled clarity. "The dash cam footage covers the entire timeline, sir. There's no flicker, no malfunction, no break." Brent pressed on. "Officer Bowman claims you became aggressive and refused to cooperate." Kat's voice tightened slightly. "I never became aggressive. I only questioned his reasoning, which is my constitutional right. As soon as he threatened arrest, I cooperated to avoid escalation." Brent shifted, flipping through his notes. "No further questions," he muttered. The cross-examination had failed to corner Kat in any significant way. If anything, her credibility only seemed stronger. Next, the jury watched the dashcam footage in its entirety. The courtroom was pin-drop silent, as the video showed Kat driving normally, pulling over calmly when the lights appeared behind her, and then Bowman approaching with visible hostility. The audio captured his tone, dismissive, borderline threatening. The search that followed felt invasive even through the grainy dashcam lens. When the video ended, the prosecutor for Kat's side let the final image linger on the screen. Bowman cuffing Kat, her face a mask of shock and anger. The moment was etched in everyone's mind. Bowman took the stand the following day. He shifted nervously, occasionally glancing at the jurors. Under direct examination by Brent, he tried to justify his actions. "I had reason to believe there was a mechanical issue with her car. After she questioned my authority, I felt I needed to ensure my safety and hers by conducting a search." In the cross-examination, Parker pounced. "Your safety?" she asked pointedly. "Ms. Robinson posed a threat to you. She was unarmed, cooperative by all accounts, and had complied with your demands." Bowman stumbled. "She was questioning me. I had to assert control of the situation." Parker let that statement hang in the air, turning to the jury. "No further questions," she said softly, letting Bowman's own words do the damage. By the final day of testimony, the jury's leanings were becoming evident. Bowman's lack of credibility and the damning video evidence had painted him into a corner. The closing arguments only sealed his fate. Desiree Parker told a succinct, powerful story of a citizen, any citizen, being mistreated by an officer who believed he was above the law. "Catherine Robinson happens to be a federal prosecutor," Parker told the jury, "but this could happen to your daughter, your sister, your mother. No one should have to fear being stopped and searched without probable cause, let alone arrested on a fabricated charge." Brent tried to salvage what he could. He painted Bowman as a hard-working cop doing a difficult job, occasionally making split-second decisions in tense situations. But the argument fell flat in light of the video evidence. Even Bowman's own union had distanced itself from him by that point, putting out a statement that they support lawful policing and not endorsing any illegal actions by members. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict in favor of Kat. The judge awarded compensatory damages and even a measure of punitive damages, stating, "This court will not tolerate an abuse of power under the color of law." When the gavel fell for the final time, a mixture of relief and vindication washed over Kat. People in the courtroom murmured approval as she and Desiree Parker exchanged a satisfied nod. The press outside clamored for statements, but Kat remained composed, echoing one central message: justice was served. Bowman left the courthouse through a different exit, escorted by security. His face was ashen, his eyes hollow. His career with the police department was effectively over, and further criminal investigations for civil rights violations loomed. The hard karma had arrived, hitting with the force of a freight train. Over the following weeks, Kat found herself flooded with letters and emails, some from strangers who thanked her for standing up to misconduct, others from local activists who saw her victory as a beacon of hope. Even her superiors applauded her courage, and though they cautioned her about the spotlight, they also recognized the case as a crucial lesson in accountability. Late one evening, as Kat finally settled down in her apartment, she reflected on the entire ordeal. It had been harrowing, exhausting, and more personal than any case she'd ever handled. But in the end, she felt stronger and more convinced than ever that the law, when wielded correctly, could still be the great equalizer. In the end, this was not just a story about one woman wronged by a single misguided cop. It was a testament to how courage and truth can light the way in even the darkest corridors of our justice system. Kat's steadfast resolve serves as a beacon for anyone who has ever felt powerless in the face of authority. We all deserve to live in a world where rights are respected and justice prevails. If you found this story gripping, inspiring, or eye-opening, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Your engagement helps us bring you more stories that shine a spotlight on injustice, celebrate real-life heroes, and remind us of the power we all hold when we refuse to stay silent. Together, we can continue to spark meaningful conversations and work towards a fairer tomorrow.